Welcome back to Things You Don't Know, where we don't just talk about what happened, we also talk about what it meant. I'm Dr. William Weaver. I'm here with my wonderful compatriots, Chandler Foster and Dr. Sean Deneen.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Dr. Weaver. And like you said, I am Chandler Foster, and I'm here to speak to the side of the audience that owns way too many superhero t-shirts, just like I do.
And I'm the resident historian. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're heading to Gotham City to talk about a character who's been with Americans throughout Depression, war, campy 60s TV, crime waves, terrorism, and the age of surveillance. Yes, my friends, Batman.
Batman. In this episode, we're going to do three big things: walk through Batman's history and the eras he's moved through, look at how he's changed over time, sometimes silly, sometimes terrifying. Ask how Batman has shaped American ideas about justice, wealth, technology, and trauma. Now, let's set the stage just a tiny bit with some details about Batman's life. He was the only son of Thomas and Martha Wayne. His father was a physician and the owner of Wayne Enterprises, and the family has been extremely wealthy for many generations. His parents are murdered in front of Bruce, and he inherits the companies and all their wealth.
That is very interesting, Dr. Weaver. And when it comes to Batman, let's start at the beginning. First things first, his origins. So, Dr. Deneen, can you walk us through this? When does Batman actually show up?
Sure. Batman first appears in Detective Comics number 27. That's cover dated May of 1939, created for DC Comics by the legendary artist Bob Kane and writer Bill Finger. What a name. He's introduced as the Batman, a mysterious vigilante who operates at night, wears a cape and cowl, and absolutely terrifies criminals.
He's not yet the brooding but rule bound Batman. Say that a couple of times. That's a tongue twister. That most people know today. That early Batman is basically a pulp hero in a bat costume.
Exactly. He's heavily influenced by the pulp characters of the 1930s, especially the Shadow. In fact, Bill Finger later admitted that his first Batman script was basically a riff on a Shadow story called Partners of Peril. The early Batman uses guns and isn't shy about killing criminals.
So, the Golden Age Batman is more grim assassin in a cape than I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you.
Pretty much. He's a creature of late Depression America. Urban crime, corrupt officials, a sense that the system isn't working. So you get a vigilante who literally takes the law into his own hands.
Then in 1940, DC introduced Robin, the Boy Wonder, in Detective Comics 38. That's a big tonal shift. Suddenly, Batman's not just a lone Avenger, he's half of the dynamic duo. Robin is there to give kids someone to identify with, but he also softens Batman's heart. You can't be quite as murderous when you've got a brightly dressed 12-year-old acrobat at your side.
And that's also when we start getting the iconic villains too, right?
Yes, Batman number one in 1940 brings in two of the most famous, both the Joker and Catwoman, helping to establish one of the most famous rogues galleries in comics.
So already within a year, you see a tension that's going to follow Batman forever. Is he a scary vigilante? Is he a kid friendly adventure hero? The answer keeps changing with the era. Let's stay in the early years for a second. What does Batman say about America in the late 1940s?
Well, you've got a country coming out of the Great Depression and going into World War II. Batman's stories lean into crime, sabotage, spies, and enemies from abroad. He's a symbol of two things: toughness and self reliance. someone who doesn't wait for institutions to work. He is the solution because the system clearly isn't enough.
And this is also when he makes the giant leap from comics to screen, right?
Yes, there's a Batman movie serial in 1943, 15 chapters of cliffhangers. It's very much a wartime artifact. Batman versus a Japanese spy villain. Sadly, as with most things in those days, heavy on the racist propaganda, very much a reflection of American attitudes during World War II.
Now, already we're seeing a pattern here. Batman becomes a mirror for whatever America's afraid of.
Then we hit the 1950s and 60s, and then Batman gets weird.
The post war era, the so called Silver Comic Book Age, brings the Comics Code Authority, a self censorship system clamping down on gore, horror, and excessive violence as a result of Dr. Frederick Wortham's book, The Seduction of the Innocent. Batman comics respond by going wild in another direction. Aliens, time travel, rainbow colored bat suits, I almost can't believe that, and plots where Batman turns into a giant baby or a zebra striped crime fighter.
God, this is Space Batman. Instead of mobsters and alleys, he's fighting alien energy creatures. That reflects Cold War anxieties and the fascination with science, rockets, and radiations, just in kind of extremely goofy ways.
Not Batman, but Astronaut Batman. And then we have my personal favorite version of Batman, the Adam West TV show that lands in 1966, and everything becomes camp.
That's something I enjoyed too as a lot as a child. Right. Batman on ABC turns a character into a rainbow of bam, pow, and zap sound effects. The show knows it's ridiculous, knows it's camp, and leans into it. It's bright, moralistic, and endlessly quotable.
That version of Batman speaks to a very specific American mood. Underneath the real anxieties about Vietnam and civil rights, you've got this TV fantasy where problems can be solved with clever gadgets, good manners, and a firm belief in following the rules. He's the squarest man in the room, and that's the joke.
So in that moment, Batman is less a dark knight and more of a parody of American respectability.
Yeah, exactly. You could say that he's the rule following dad of superheroes.
That's a really good way to put that, Dr. Weaver. So tell me something. When do we get back to the darker Batman?
In the 1970s, writers like Dennis O'Neil and artists like Neil Adams, I remember these comics, started dragging Batman back to his noir roots. Gotham becomes a grim, decaying city again, very much in line with real world urban decline in places like New York.
This is the era of urban crisis, rising crimes, budget problems, headlines about failing cities. Batman becomes a way to explore those fears. He's less a campy dad figure and more an obsessive detective who stalks the rooftops, facing realistic social issues like drugs, corruption, and organized crime.
So the pendulum swings pulp vigilante to campy sci-fi hero back to gritty detective.
Then comes a seismic shift in the mid 1980s. Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One, along with works like The Killing Joke, take Batman to a new level of psychological darkness.
Let me just say very briefly, The Killing Joke has Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, turned into a quadriplegic. And as a person with an exceptionality, I found both sadness and identification in that role. I was glad to see it getting a little more serious. These stories make Batman older, angrier, more frustrated, and more morally ambiguous. He's bruised by decades of fighting crime, the government is suspect, and institutions are failing. This lines up with Reagan era anxieties, Cold War burnout, and the rising fear of lawlessness in the big cities.
And then comes Tim Burton's Batman movie in 1989, and suddenly Batman is everywhere.
You're right, Chandler. Yes, the 1989 film with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson turns Batman into a global pop culture phenomenon. Dark Art Deco visuals, a brooding hero, and the Joker is a grotesque chaos figure, plus a tidal wave of merchandise that puts the bat symbol on everything from cereal boxes to bed sheets.
From that point on, Batman is supposed to be dark becomes the default assumption for a lot of fans. He's the anti Superman, still a hero, but grim, obsessive, and morally complicated.
And in 1992, we get Batman, the animated series starring Kevin Conroy, which takes that darkness and makes it accessible to kids, but with serious stories about crime, guilt, mental illness, and corruption.
That shows hardwires a whole generation to see Batman as a tragic figure, a man broken by childhood trauma. Remember, his parents were murdered in front of him, who's determined to make sure no one else feels what he felt.
Then we hit the 2000s, getting into my time here, and everything gets even more grounded now.
Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy between 2005 and 2012 frames Batman in the context of terrorism, organized crime, and mass surveillance. Bruce Wayne uses military grade technology, black op tactics, and a citywide sonar system to fight enemies who sometimes look like a lot of real world terrorists.
Now, Batman is not just a symbol of justice. He's also a way to talk about the ethics of power. Is it okay for one man and one billionaire to build a private surveillance empire to police a city? Those films pose that question quite directly.
And it just keeps on shifting. Zack Snyder's Batman is older and traumatized, operating in a hyper destructive universe. Matt Reeves, the Batman, gives us a younger, almost emo detective tracking serial killers and online extremists.
And beyond film, Batman is a titan in video games, especially the Arkham series. Those games invite players to be Batman, using gadgets, stealth, and detective work to save a crumbling city.
In all of these, you see Batman evolving with American fears. Mobsters and spies in the 40s, aliens and science in the 60s, urban decay in the 70s, crime waves and institutional distrust in the 80s and 90s, terror and surveillance in the 2000s. Batman is a mood ring for American anxieties.
Now, let's zoom out. What ideas about America does Batman actually embody?
Well, first big one, the tension between justice and vengeance. Batman is basically a walking question mark about whether it's ever okay to step outside the law.
He operates as a vigilante in a system he believes and to a certain extent knows is broken. Corrupt cops, bought off politicians, institutions that talk a good game but can't keep and don't seem to be interested in keeping people safe. That speaks to a persistent American suspicion of government and bureaucracy, what we call the deep state today. The fantasy is if the system fails us, someone from the outside, incorruptible, can step in and fix it.
But Batman refuses to cross certain lines. No guns, no killing in most modern interpretations. That's really crucial. America has a real obsession with taking matters into our own hands. But Batman also reflects the fear of becoming the very thing you're fighting. He's the hero constantly asking himself, how far is too far?
At least he has a conscience. But now let's talk about Bruce Wayne as a billionaire. Now that's a whole other can of worms we're about to open up.
Absolutely. From the start, Bruce Wayne is a wealthy industrialist. He's the classic American self made man myth, but scaled up to absurd levels. He doesn't have superpowers. What he has is money, training, and willpower.
And let's not forget that he was not really a self made man. He inherited the money.
From his parents.
Yeah. He fits neatly into the ideal of the rugged individualist in some ways. But with a twist, Bruce Wayne doesn't just hoard his wealth. In many versions, he uses it for philanthropy and infrastructure, while also funding his vigilante crusade, a true contradiction. That sets up a fantasy where a good billionaire can fix what institutions cannot.
Which in the 21st century is controversial.
Exactly. As Americans have become more skeptical of extreme wealth, Batman reads differently. Some see him as a symbol of responsibility. If billionaires existed, they should act like this. Others see him as a troubling fantasy of private, unaccountable power. The fact that he can be both is part of his staying power.
Let's talk trauma now. Batman's whole origin is basically one long therapy case study.
Quite so. His parents are murdered directly in front of him as a child, something first spelled out explicitly in the late 1930s and refined over time, along with different speculations on exactly who did it. He spends the rest of his life trying to make sure that never happens to anyone else.
That speaks to a huge American theme, turning personal trauma into a mission. On one hand, it's inspiring. He doesn't become a villain, he becomes someone who protects others. On the other hand, modern stories increasingly ask, is this healthy? Is it heroic? Or is it an obsession?
So, Batman becomes a way for Americans to talk about grief, mental health, and the idea of pushing through pain, sometime in productive ways and sometime destructively. We also have to mention the toys, the Batmobile, the Bat computer, grappling guns, sonar, drones.
From the 1960s utility belt to the hyper realistic military tech of the Nolan films, Batman has always reflected America's love affair with technology. The message is often if you're smart enough, wealthy enough, and have the right tools, you can solve anything.
But there's a flip side. In the post 9/11 era, Batman uses citywide surveillance technology and forces Americans to confront the trade off between safety and privacy. Is it okay if the quote good guy watches everyone? Do ends justify means? Batman often voluntarily limits his own tools, destroying a surveillance system after using it, for instance, mirroring debates about government spying and corporate data collection.
Gotham itself is practically a character. What does it represent?
Gotham is the American city turned up to 11. Crime, inequality, corruption, but also communities worth saving. It's every nightmare headline about the city rolled into one, but it's also the place Batman refuses to abandon.
Think of Gotham as the shadow of the American dream. If Metropolis, the home of Superman, is bright and optimistic, Gotham is the part of America that knows something's broken and isn't sure it can be fixed. Batman's choice to stay there night after night says something powerful about refusing to give up on flawed systems.
You know, one thing that fascinates me is how different Batman can coexist. Brutal Frank Miller, animated series Batman, Lego Batman, and of course, my favorite, the Adam West Batman.
Scholars of popular culture talk about precisely that. Batman is a figure who's constantly reinvented and reinterpreted. One academic collection even calls him a man blurred by the endless reinvention that is modern mass culture, highlighting his role as both an icon and a commodity.
And that's very American. We're always remixing our myths. Batman is the same core idea, a traumatized billionaire who fights crime in a bat suit, but the tone, the politics, and the moral emphasis change with each era.
So when someone says, Batman would never do X, what they often mean is, my Batman wouldn't do X.
Exactamundo. Your Batman might be a noir detective, a campy dad figure, a brutal avenger, or a damaged but hopeful guardian. Each version reflects what its audience wants from a hero at that moment.
Modern versions lean hard on the idea that Batman is more than just a guy in the suit. He's a symbol.
Yes, that's a recurring theme. I'm not just a man, I'm an idea, in other words. The bat symbol is meant to scare criminals and inspire ordinary people. In American terms, that's a conversation about branding, protest, and collective identity. Think of real world movements that use symbols, masks, colors, hashtags. Batman anticipates that idea. You create a visual symbol big enough that it outlives you and inspires others to act.
Even in art, Batman shows up as an icon in pop art and in contemporary works. Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, and others have folded comic book heroes into critiques of consumer culture. I've written a paper looking at Batman figures around the world and their links with colonialism, Shinto and Asian religions, and feminist culture. Batman is both subject and commentary. He's a hero and a logo at the same time.
And as if to prove the point even further, Batman literally has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame now.
He does.
Batman.
In 2024, Batman became the first superhero to receive a star on a Walk of Fame. On the Walk of Fame. Just think about that, ladies and gentlemen. A sign of just how fully he's crossed from a pulp comic book character to a mainstream cultural monument.
Think about that for a second. A fictional vigilante born in 1939 in a cheap comic book gets honored alongside real actors and musicians. That tells you how deeply he's embedded in America's imagination.
Pretty iconic and creative way to convey that too, if you ask me. Now, let's land this bat plane. Why do we keep coming back to this one guy in this cape over and over for almost a century? Seems kind of redundant.
Well, from a historian standpoint, Batman endures because he's flexible. He can survive camp, war propaganda, noir, cyberpunk, and prestige cinema. He keeps evolving as America's fears and hopes evolve.
Psychologically, he hits several big notes at once. He's aspirational, no powers, just discipline, training, and stubbornness. He's tragic, driven by a wound that never fully heals. He's morally complex, constantly negotiating how far a hero can go. That complexity lets each era tell its own story through him.
And from the van perspective, Batman is the answer to the fantasy question. What if I had the time, the money, and the guts to fix what's wrong? It's a dangerous fantasy, but it's also very powerful.
He embodies both the light and dark sides of American individualism. On the light side, he's responsibility, courage, and sacrifice. On the dark side, obsession, vigilantism, and faith in a single exceptional person instead of collective solutions.
Which means studying Batman isn't just studying a comic book character, it's studying on a larger scale how Americans imagine justice, power, grief, cities, wealth, and technology.
So that's our tour of The Dark Knight, from pulp vigilante to camp TV star to global icon and cultural mirror.
We would love to hear your Batman. Is it Adam West, Michael Keaton, Kevin Conroy in the animated series, Lego Batman, or that one fan fiction version you'll never admit that you wrote?
You got me, folks. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with the Batman fan in your life. And maybe that friend who thinks superheroes are just for kids. Batman has been reflecting American ideas for over 80 years now. That's not just kid stuff.
Yeah, for things you don't know, I'm Dr. William Weaver.
I'm Dr. Sean Deneen.
And I'm Chandler Foster, reminding you to always stay curious, stay safe, and if you're going to fight crime, maybe leave the rooftop jumping to the professionals.